Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from death to immortality. Lead us from darkness to light. Light us through and through with thy ever effulgent presence. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. The topic, grace or self-effort, has been one that I know since I moved into the convent. I heard the argument each summer whether it was grace or self-effort that gave you the realization. Now, Swami Pavitrananda would take the side of self-effort. Swami Prabhavananda would take the side of grace. And to this day, I know that you need both. This is a quote that I have thought was in the gospel for forever. The breeze of grace is always blowing. Unfurl your sail. Well, I went to look up the exact quote in the gospel, and it's not there. It is something Ramakrishna said over and over again, but it wasn't when M was around, evidently. If anyone can find it, please email me. Where I have read it over and over again is in the Eternal Companion and in the Apostles of Ramakrishna, where Shivananda also talks of Ramakrishna saying, the breeze of grace is always blowing. Unfurl your sail. Unfurl your sail is the self-effort part of realization. Maharaj went on to say that Swami Brahmananda, give up worldly enjoyments and completely resign yourself to the Lord if you want realization. Shun temporary pleasures. Ask yourself, what is it I want? Do I want this fleeting life of transient pleasure, or do I want eternal bliss? That's the first question that we have to answer for ourselves. Are we trying to get rid of what Swami Turiyananda called existential suffering? It's that vague feeling that there's always something missing. There's more to life than I seem to be experiencing. According to Swami Vijnanananda, two things have to be taken into account. One is fate, and the other human effort. Now, to quote him, Mahakala is the Lord of time. What Westerners call fate or destiny, we, meaning in India, characterize as the result of past action. The river of time is flowing on. Will it do to be drifting with the current? Do we sometimes feel like we are drifting with the current rather than crossing the river? According to Swami Vijnanananda, you have to cross the river, and you can only go across if you swim with the current. You can't swim upstream. I mean, salmon may do it, but it's not if you use the karma and the position that you are born with, use that to get yourself forward and realize God, if that's what you want to do. Now, I said last week or 2 weeks ago when Pravrajika was giving her wonderful lecture on the Gita and Krishna, I said I would relate this to Krishna also. When in my reading, I've decided, in my interpretation, the Bhagavatam is the path of divine grace. There's some self-effort involved, but mostly divine grace. The path of the Gita, Krishna of the Gita, is the path of self-effort, renunciation, and tapasya. As he says in the very first part to Arjuna when he wants to give up the fight, he says, you can't. That is your duty as a kshatriya. You must do your dharma. So the difference between the two paths, these two paths, one is the path of knowledge, jnana, and the other is the path of bhakti, which is the easiest one, according to Sri Ramakrishna, for this Kali Yuga. The difference is only in the path. The goal, the primary goal is exactly the same. It is to overcome that existential suffering, the vague feeling that there's more to this than I know. The follower of jnana will have discrimination and dispassion. This is quoting Swami Turiyananda. Discrimination and dispassion between the real and the unreal. He controls his mind through that tries to attain liberation. Very much as many of you have read in the gospel when Sri Ramakrishna was studying with Nangta, the naked one, and he was trying to get him to experience the non-dual samadhi. And Ramakrishna could not get past his mother, Kali. He could not get past, his mind would not go past Kali, his devotion to her. So Nangta, his guru, put a glass shard, pressed it between his eyebrows, and it broke the bond of duality. He had the non-dual experience. Bhaktas, on the other hand, I'm quoting Swami Turiyananda again, try to chant and sing the names of God, listen to stories about their chosen ideal, meditate on the Lord, and that anticipates bliss. But if you notice, both of them stress mind control. You must overcome the vagaries of your mind. You must take a hold of it and not let it wander, or as Swami Vijnanananda said, just float down the river. This doesn't accomplish much. It's sometimes pleasant, but it's not satisfying. And how do we do that? How do we control our minds? Well, as they say in the case of jnana, we discriminate between the unreal and the real. We do japa, we try to meditate, we try and gather that wandering mind into one pointed concentration. According to the bhakta, we concentrate that wandering mind, we change it, turn it all over to our chosen ideal. Every vagary that we have of our mind, we do it in the company of our ideal. As Brother Lawrence said, practice the constant companionship of God. According to Swami Ramakrishnananda, he said, what's the use of idle talk? Now, we all talk about what we're going to do and how we're going to, and what we're doing as far as our spiritual path goes. We have our karma yoga, we have our jnana yoga, we have our bhakti yoga, we have our raja yoga, and we sit down and sit down or do them all. But he says, what is the use of this idle talk about it? Take japa and meditation, do it with concentration and a lot of effort for a while at least. This will train your mind into constantly where the Lord comes first before you think of anything else. Labor hard at that for a while, at least, he says, and you will know everything in time. No use putting abstruse questions. It will lead to nothing. Everyone talks, but no one does anything. I don't know whether any of you have encountered this, but meetings, business meetings are very much a lot of talk and no conclusions are reached. We kind of, okay, now what are we going to do? Ramakrishnananda went on to say, exertion brings its own rewards. Why not practice as you were instructed by your guru? And I'll quote Swami Sarvadevananda there. He said, don't edit. Don't edit your guru, don't add anything, and don't subtract anything. Now, many of us do this in our daily activities because we either think we're not doing enough, or we go to the other side of the thing and say, oh, I don't have time to do that much. This is perfectly normal, because we have not yet identified or put our primary emphasis on the divine. We are still thinking in terms of our small self. It's our small self that doesn't have time, that is overwhelmed by what's going on in our mind. It's not our divine self. If we simply do everything as it comes up, as like the Buddhists say, live in the now, live right this moment. What do I have to do? And just do that. We don't anticipate what we have to do in the future. We don't think about what we did in the past. We simply do what comes up at this moment. I mean, there's many books written on it. The Power of Now. All of these books tell us this same truth. Live in the present. Most of our problems are mental problems that hark back to either projecting what could happen, like we're projecting right now that we got some warnings from the county, there may be flash floods. There's not a cloud in the sky, but we could have flash floods. These things are projections. If we live exactly in the moment, what's happening now, we don't waste our energy. I'm quoting Swami Turiyananda quite a bit today because he seems to be a perfect example of someone who has superior mind control. I know you have all read the story in his life of where he could remove his mind from his body and they could do surgery on his body without him feeling a thing. This is extreme mind control. Not necessarily the one that we need to pursue, but the one that if you have that, you have the other control too. What he says, and this is a man speaking from total experience, when the mind becomes pure and calm, the body becomes free from ailments. Only spiritual practice can make the mind pure. Practice, practice, practice sadhana without selfish motives. There's the little catch. Without selfish motives. Don't expect certain results. One must cultivate love and devotion to God. Then automatically the mind will be drawn from worldly things. At that time, the thought of the body won't trouble you much. The thought of the mother will predominate. And then what happens? One floats in bliss. Sounds good to me. But it's not seeking a result. What he says is do the practice, make the self-effort, and the grace will come. And suddenly you will be floating in bliss. There won't be problems that you have to think about. Now, how do we do this? Well, in the Gita, Krishna totally lays it on self-effort. He promises not to take part in the battle, he'll just be there. Now, mind you, this is grace that he's even there. But he promises not to interfere. Well, he does a tiny bit because he never keeps his promise completely because he can do anything. He is the Lord. So, but in one of his statements, he says the self must be raised by the self. And this is the small self. This is you. This is me. For the self is the friend of oneself, and this self is the enemy of oneself. Now, when you stop and think of it, who stands in our way to realization? Nothing. Absolutely nothing stands in our way to God realization except ourselves, our own mind. There's nothing else that stands in the way. As Ramakrishna said, though I can't find it in the gospel, the breeze of grace is always blowing. We are the ones who don't unfurl our sail and put our boat in the water. We think of excuses, we think of things we should do, want to do, could do. Oh, I could go on this pilgrimage. That sort of spiritualizes it. But if we go down to and analyze with great discrimination, a lot of it is just restlessness. We want to see a different area. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's human nature. That doesn't say you're anything but a human being. But just remember that nothing is keeping us from God realization except our own self. It's that easy. If we could take a hold of our mind and put it completely on God, we would have realization right now. And I've had many holy men have told us that. You could have it right this minute if you could take your mind and take a hold of it. And there's the problem. Most of us have spent a great deal of our lives looking outside, looking at things to do outside, trying to achieve something. We had to go, we go to school, we have to get good grades, or we have to get the part in the play, or we have to get, be the star football player. We have ambitions and goals in the external world. If we have that same strength of purpose in our interior life, we would have God. Someone asked Swami Vijnanananda, because Swami Vijnanananda was this man's guru, he says, "Please, Father, please help me that I may be able to realize God." And do you know what Swami Vijnanananda's answer was? One has to help oneself, you see. No one can do it for you. Your guru gives you the direction to go in, gives you the instructions and gives you the direction. But when it comes down to the final word, you must do it yourself. You must put in the effort. You must practice what your guru says and not expect immediate results if you can't give it your whole mind to it. If you could give your whole mind, then you wouldn't have to worry about results. They would be there. As Jesus said, give me your whole heart, give love and, no, that's Krishna. I get them mixed up periodically. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. Now that's what Jesus said. Okay, isn't that constant remembrance and having everything else out of your mind? Give me your whole mind. And love thy neighbor as thyself. This is also not you. It's going outside yourself, thinking of others before you think of yourself. I remember once, Swami Prabhupada once said, I said, why do we have to do keep all of these rules and regulations? There's a lot in our kitchen. And he said, well, it's to train your mind. As soon as your mind is trained, the rules and regulations are not as important. But until your mind is trained to think of God first, then it is very important to practice those rules and regulations. Practice your routine, keep everything exactly as it should. Once your mind, you automatically think of God before you think of anything else, you'll notice that a lot of the older swamis do things that you think, I didn't think they'd do that. I remember many people were kind of surprised that Swami Swahananda liked to watch television. But he didn't see television the way you and I look at it. His mind wasn't on that program. He saw the play of the Lord in everything. It didn't really matter what was on as long as it was upright and inspirational. He liked good thoughts on television. He was not watching the junk. So we have to gather the forces of our mind and direct them to God. And if you have problems with the word God, then substitute Brahman, substitute the mother, substitute the divine. I say God because that's the way I was raised, and it doesn't bother me at all. I have no problem with it. But gather your mind and put it one pointedly on that sense of the divine and the spirit, and you will find bliss. So when I said that the Bhagavatam was, which is the story of Krishna, but it usually covers Krishna's life without the Battle of Kurukshetra. It covers Krishna's life from the time he was born to the time he goes to Mathura. We get a little vague in Mathura. He goes a couple things, but primarily it covers the joyful period of Krishna as a child, a 9-year-old in Vrindavan, with total bliss, total joy. The Lord is living with you. It's all the cowherd boys and the cowherd girls and everyone, the whole of Vrindavan and that whole area sang with the bliss of God. Nothing destroyed their happiness because Krishna was there. So how did we get the Bhagavatam? Okay, we had King Parikshit, who was dying. He had 7 days to live. He's been poisoned. And he is asking, he wants to know, what do I do with this last 7 days? So he asks Shukadev, all of us are dying, and all of us are on the threshold of death. What are the duties of a living being by which one can be fulfilled in a very short time? And Shukadev answers, the duty of human beings is to think, listen to, and sing the glories of the all-pervading Lord. It's the gist of the Bhagavatam, thinking of the Lord, cognating on him, and seeing his glories. This is the essence of all scriptures. And when you stop and think about it, what does Jesus ask us to do? Exactly the same thing. Think of me. Enjoy the world while the bridegroom is here. You'll suffer later. But enjoy the company of the bridegroom while he's here. So then, according to, still with the Bhagavatam, singing or the repetition of God's name, the mantra, is the easiest path and the greatest of spiritual practices. When you stop and think about it, when you sit down and you start chanting the name, saying your mantra, your guru might have given you a certain number of times to repeat it when you sit down, maybe not. you can ask, but you received your own instructions. If you have not got a guru yet, there are, of course, books that you can read. I personally recommend A Living Guru, but there's a book called The Mantra Handbook that can kind of get you started by Eknath Easwaran. And he gives proven mantras in every religion. There are The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence, which is also a mantra in its own way, and the Way of the Pilgrim, which is a Russian starets monk, wandering monk, and he repeats the mantra of Jesus. All of these things show the efficacy of the mantra and repeating it, because in each one of the names, it's inherent. All of the power of the divine is inherent in every name of God. Moreover, you don't have to follow any rules or any regulations, because you can do that any time of the day, anywhere. I remember this was Swami Swahananda, who took up traveling in his old age. He said, "We're never bored in the airport. We can sit and watch people and do our mantra. There's nothing boring about that name." And we say the Chaitanya prayer every morning in the temple. No times are set, no rites are needful for chanting of the Lord's name. This is something that you can do anytime. Anytime your mind gets disturbed, try to calm the disturbance with the chanting of your mantra. Anything that you do in worshiping the divine or putting your mind there will only bring good, and it will not disappear. It doesn't disappear, it doesn't dissipate, it doesn't go away. Every effort you make is like putting money in the bank. And as long as you continue to put money in the bank, you're not going to run out. And if you do happen to do something totally bizarre, it's all still in the bank for the next life. So you never lose interest, you always have it there. Once again with Turiyananda, he had, he lived in Northern California with a group of Western devotees for almost a year. The book is called With the Swamis in America, and it's fascinating. They started an ashram out there, and it was so far out in the country that they had to even haul in water. So he had a great deal of experience with Westerners. And he said, speaking of Westerners, yes, as a race, you, the English and the Americans, are very materialistic, but I have met exceptions. And activity is not bad. I like your energy. You're up and doing. I see no idleness anywhere. Here's the catch. Only that energy should be controlled. It should go inward also. And here he gets into the Gita again. Activity in inactivity, but not laziness. And we can sometimes fool ourselves, but what is activity in inactivity? That's, to my mind, basically meditation. You sit down, you seem to be totally inactive, but oh my goodness, don't fall into the slumberland of blank mind, which is a great detriment to meditation. When they say activity in inactivity, they mean consciously controlling the mind and making it one-pointed. When it starts to wander, you can watch it wander for a while, but gently bring it back. but you are active the entire time. Your mind is. So we have the grace and the self-effort. I personally have always been on the side of grace. My effort, I make the effort, but sometimes, which you should not, you don't evaluate your effort, okay? Do the best you can and that's it, and offer it to God. The fact, and this is Shivananda, whom I also adore, the fact that sometimes you lose control of your mind only signifies that a big wave will come and you will have great peace. So don't ever beat yourself up about don't set excessive goals for yourself at first. Do exactly what your guru says, and then talk to him if he is still alive. Add what you can, but do not jump in with 200% interest so that you drop it later. That's not self-effort. Self-effort is extremely steady. It's extremely tedious if you're having a dry period. Extremely tedious. But since you're not engaged in what the results are, that's okay. You just keep at it. It's like an athlete or any person who has success in any field, a writer. Though it doesn't seem to be going well, you continue because that's what you do. I think we knew Christopher Isherwood and he wrote prolifically, but not every day with great success, but he wrote every day. You do what you do and you do the best you can that day. Yep, there is no failure. You cannot fail in this path. If you decide that this is what you want, then just keep at it because there is absolutely no failure. You will get there. Even if you are drifting in the current, like Vijnanananda said, and not consciously trying to cross the river, the current will take you there eventually, but it could take many, many lifetimes. And one of the most blatant signs of grace is that all of you have already started thinking of the divine. All of you who are attending this lecture or attending any churches or any of these Zooms that are happening have already felt the grace of God. Because it is not the world that feels the draw of the divine. That's already, you have put in effort in past lives or here, you feel that. So you have to say, yes, I have the grace of God already. I have the grace of God. I have the grace of the guru, possibly. And then comes the tricky one. Do I have the grace of my own mind? That's the one we work on, the grace of our own minds. And don't, as Swami Vivekananda said, don't call yourself a sinner. Never call yourself a sinner. We all make mistakes. That's a human birth. The only thing that you can do if you have made mistakes is say, I won't do them again. I will make every effort not to repeat that. And then to follow that, not to repeat it. And sometimes you know, we are still human, we're in our body, we might forget. I'm not going to eat chocolate for the next 2 weeks. Oh dear. There's a piece of a Ritter bar, which I just love. Well, one little piece won't hurt. No, you have to have firm determination. Now, mind you, I don't think my spiritual life is going to die because of a piece of Ritter's chocolate, but it does show you that the little ways, if we take care of our big aspirations of realizing God and training our mind to think first of God in all incidences, in every part of our day, the rest will follow in line. It will fall in line. It will be good. And I'm going to end this with a quote from Maharaj again. Make a little effort. Spread the sails of devotion, and the spiritual breeze that is forever blowing will carry you toward your goal. Do not look back, go forward, never look back. Now, if anyone has any questions or comments, please, now is the time. Okay. Do we have any down there writing it? Okay. Hi, Andra. Okay, then we will end with a chant. And please join me. Om Purnamida Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all, yet is Brahman still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Now take care, everyone, and stay healthy. Stay cool if you can. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. What's your next topic?
Fearlessness.
Okay, Pravrajika will be talking in 2 weeks on fearlessness, Zoom lecture from here. I hope you can make it.